Coming up next on Marketing Mavericks, we talk about the Mashie Marketing Awards. What happened in 2014? How do you become a Vineographer? And how are we using Snapchat to promote brands? Coming up next.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Marketing Mavericks is provided by Cashfly at CACHEFLY.com.
This episode of Marketing Mavericks is brought to you by Audible.com. To download a free audiobook of your choice, go to audiblepodcast.com/mm. And by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create your own professional website or online portfolio. Now introducing Squarespace 7 with better site management tools and other improvements. For a free 2-week trial and 10% off, go to squarespace.com and use offer code MM. This is Marketing Mavericks, episode 31, recorded Thursday, November 13, 2014, the Mashie Marketing Awards. Welcome to Marketing Mavericks, where we talk about everything at the intersection of technology and marketing, creative, video, what's happening in the space of brands and businesses online, and what technology are they using to reach customers today? And as consumers, how are we connecting back? How are we buying services? All that fun stuff. I am your host, Tonya Hall, and our technical director is John Salinas. Thanks, John, for stepping up today and helping us get the show out and ready to go. Our co-host today is Todd Wasserman. He is the business editor at Mashable and friend of Marketing Mavericks. Welcome, Todd.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Hi there. Thanks for having me. And our guest, David Berkowitz, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at MRY and a contributing editor at Ad Age. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And Shoshana Winter, who is the Executive Planning Director of Digital Integration at McGarry Bowen. Welcome, Shoshana.
Thank you.
Fabulous. And we're going to talk today a lot. The reason that Todd is co-hosting the show with me, not just because he's an awesome business editor and understands everything in the space of marketing and technology, but we're going to talk about the Mashies and what happened in the space of creative and video over the course of 2014, what we recognized as being new and different. And Shoshana, you as a planning director in digital integration is certainly a big challenge that businesses have. And you've got some special insight, I think, to offer in that space. And David, yep, you write for Ad Age. In fact, we've tried to get you on the show before, but you're such a busy guy. You're never available.
Well, I want to make myself available for you.
All right. So, Todd, let's set up the stage a little bit for the Mashies. What are the Mashies? When did they start?
The Mashies started last year, and last year, I'd say around spring of 2013, we the events team here was kind of looking at opportunities, and one thing we noticed was there's a lot of award shows for advertising, but there aren't any that are really focused on social media and the kind of new frontier of marketing, and none of them took kind of a granular deep dive into what people are doing on these various social media channels and so forth. So we thought there was a good opportunity there. So we thought about an award show. I said, why don't we call it the Mashies? And they said, no. And then a month or two later, they're like, that's a pretty good name, so we'll go with that. So the first Mashies was last November 2013, and then we just had our second one a week or so ago.
So wait, how do you go from no, we're not calling it to Mashies to yeah, that's all right?
I don't know. I thought it was a great name. Like, oh, the Mashies is catchy. People know it, and they're like, how about the Breakthrough Business Awards or something? And they kept going back with these different names. And sometimes the simplest is the best, and I think that was why you hear it once and you remember it.
I remember it. It's pretty catchy. And there are other award shows, and we certainly talk about those here on Mavericks as well, because we want to understand what are we recognizing. I think this space that Shoshana, you and I were talking a little bit before the show around where brands are really trying to wrap their head around. Again, how to be, digital, how digital integration works. and how to be authentic and how to do it in such a way that it doesn't seem forced and that people actually respond to it and it ends up in sales. Let's talk, Shoshana, a little bit about your role and what you focus on and your contribution at Gary McBowen.
Sure. So I've been here a pretty short time, and my background is actually much more as a native digital marketer, running marketing organizations for mostly internet startups. One of them was Audible. I've worked at a bunch of emerging music brands over the years. But I've always been really curious about how traditional brands that are faced with the challenge of digital and all the channels that are available to us as marketers, how are they going to take advantage of that opportunity when they really don't own the air in the same way they do with traditional media? And so I started here a few months ago, and Gary Bowen is very well known as a pretty hot creative shop. We make really beautiful, mostly traditional advertising, but more and more we're moving into sort of a multi-channel, omni-channel space, if you will. And really my role here is to work with our clients and with the agency to help really understand how do you translate a great creative idea that would normally live only in television or print and have it live in all the other channels that consumers interact with in a way that is both loyal to that idea, but is really going to be, as to your point, authentic to the space that they're in. There's a lot of sort of rethinking that I think has to take place, both in terms of the individuals that make the actual advertising, but also even the way clients think about advertising.
And, we use these industry terms a lot, and I think we get caught in these very trendy phrases, and they mean something to us as marketers. But for somebody who maybe doesn't understand, just a really quick description of what omni-channel means to somebody who's listening to the show.
Sure. So, I mean, I know these are those annoying catchphrases that I think we all get sick of hearing after a while, but we live in a world, I think there's two words. There's omni-channel, which basically means that when you come up with an idea or a sort of a means of communicating a brand's objectives in media, that we should be thinking about these things in a media agnostic way, because that's how the consumer today is really experiencing them. They're not making the distinction necessarily between a brand message that they're having on television or online or mobile. To them, it's sort of all part of the way they live their lives. So, I think part of the challenge for omnichannel, which means basically media agnostic, is how do you come up with great ideas that are going to break through in today's environment that fall off of the brand equity of the particular client, but at the same time are scalable enough that they could live in places like Facebook or Twitter or in pre-roll on YouTube, et cetera. And then I think the flip side of that is multi-channel, which I think, both those terms are used a lot by retailers, which is the ability to be able to see a particular campaign across as many channels as possible. And I think the problem there is, which we call the matching luggage problem, is a lot of the way a lot of traditional agencies approach that is they start with the big television campaign, and then they just basically take that creative and cut it into pieces that fit all of the different formats without really being respectful of the native environment that those pieces of communication live within. So, that's sort of the way we define it. And, our goal is to really invest as much as we can in the idea, because that's really why we're in business, is to do the kind of thinking that often brands can't do on their own, and then to come up with the best marketing mix and executions that work, sort of across a bunch of different channels that make sense for a brand.
Yeah, so omni-channel basically is just, again, an industry term that we use a lot. But I know we've talked a lot about it here on the show. David Berkowitz, you are actually not only Chief Marketing Officer, but you are at an agency, but you also are a contributor at Ad Age. And why we have you, another reason we have you on the show, is you were a judge for the Mashies. What was your biggest challenge? What's that?
Yeah, those are all true. Just wanted to verify that.
Verification accepted. So what was your biggest challenge going into the Mashies? Because here's my thinking is we know some of the creative and ads and campaigns that we feel are obviously successful, but then there are others that it's difficult to measure because this is such a new space, and we have to look at, is it the number of likes? Is it how something is perceived, by us by numbers and views, or is it actually by results? I think, in the past, I actually tried to track how many sales we made or how productive we were with our call centers and that sort of thing. But today, it's not so easy. What was your approach when you, as a judge for the Mashies, how did you decide who would win in the specific categories? Did you go into it with some sort of specific mindset?
Yeah, I mean, we just looked at agencies where we had friends working there and just wanted to pick them. No, that's a joke. But I'm glad you honed in on the results piece, because one thing that I don't know if even Todd, you want the word to get out there. I know you're on the editorial side, and not sales, but a little hint for anyone considering submitting awards: if there are no results listed whatsoever of any kind, don't bother spending your money submitting this. It doesn't matter how great and beautiful the video is or anything else. It's just so that was a little surprising. But what was what's exciting about an award show like the Mashies is ultimately whatever you're thinking when you go there, and whatever you think you've heard of and think it's ultimately you're sitting in a room with some other judges. There in my room there are people I hadn't met before, and so it was just kind of riffing off each other, and so there were a lot of great thoughts coming from people with these other perspectives that, like, even if I thought, oh yeah, this was a slam dunk, it's a very iterative process. But with results, I know this just being on the agency side, it's not like everything you're going to say, okay, well, you're going to have to do this, and then we're going to be able to measure it all the way through in every channel, and it doesn't typically work like that. But at least set up a premise and say, this is what we at least tried to do, and here is some way we tried to tackle how successful that was. And so for some, it was really very. I mean, look at the Pringles Flavor Slam at Walmart, and so that was one from the Integer group, and so that was one I was actually surprised that I wasn't very familiar with. It was phenomenally successful. They put a lot in there in terms of showing what it did for the brand, and yet some others, it was much harder to have, like the Denny's Tumblr page was a really fun one. Now I don't know how many super slams were sold because of the really funny and often really weird content that Denny puts out, but I did get the sense that it did something for the brand that and that Tumblr was just became a core part of how that brand expressed themselves, and it was just such a great use of the medium. I don't need to know literally how many eggs went into the making of that Tumblr to decide that.
So Todd, there are a lot of different award winners here, and I think, we look at the Con Lions that happened this summer, and we talked about that and what the big winners are. And we saw some repeat winners here. What was probably one of the biggest takeaways that you took out of these awards that maybe didn't happen or hadn't happened by the Con Festival that seemed a fairly new revelation?
Yeah, I think as David said, there has to be results. There's already an award show, though, that's based on how the most successful ad campaigns, and that's the Effies. And Con is about sort of like the prestige of the work. It's about, clever creative. It's about, often like kind of divorced from the product they're selling, just as this great is this great work in itself. And I think what we were looking for here was a sort of combination of those things, like when we're talking about multi-channel, in a lot of these new digital channels, people don't have to sit and look at your ad. So you have to make it entertaining to a certain extent. And you have to also, in addition to that, really kind of get people to look at the brand in a new way. So I think like Denny's Twitter is a good example. Denny's is a brand that a lot of people have looked at as like a kind of a stale diner experience, but the Denny's Twitter account is totally different. So you can follow it just for fun, but then inevitably you're going to have a different view of the brand. So that's what we were kind of looking for, was sort of an amalgam of all those things.
You know, something, Shoshana, I think that you could probably speak to is at the Con Festival in the summer. A lot of those are really based on creative and the creative concepts that go behind those, and less on the interactive piece, less on interacting with consumers. What do you think is the big takeaway from the interactivity? I mean, why is it that the Mashies or that we are focusing on interactivity today?
You know, it's so interesting because the con actually more and more does have categories that are either called integrated or interactive, and they have really changed. They've attempted to really change the way they think about the categories so that it's reflective of the way media is consumed. But the irony is most of the campaigns that are winning are films, right? Whether they're videos that are running on YouTube or in, online channels, or whether they truly are television commercials that might have some sort of social extension. And what's really interesting is, and what I think is sort of missed there, is more and more of video is being consumed in an interactive environment. And I don't think from a creative perspective, although a lot of the films are beautiful and really are, resonate as, pieces of storytelling for the brand, it doesn't take advantage of the fact that people can interact or react. And to me, awards like the Mashies and others that have emerged in the space are really reflecting more realistically, in a way, of how do you think about creativity, not just in a one-way storytelling environment, but how do you redefine what it means to be creative and to create creative communication when the consumer is part of the dialogue and when you're almost inviting the consumer to participate. And I think it's a greater challenge, but it's much more reflective of the way most of us are consuming this content. So to me, it's a little bit of a missed opportunity and doesn't necessarily reflect the true brand challenges that brands are facing when they have to create marketing campaigns.
Vine is something, and we've got Instagram, we've got all these ways to, as marketers, use really short form content to get a message across. And we're trying to figure out what that is. And I know we, even as media people, how do I use my Instagram? And one of the ET, actually, something that happened here just in the last couple of days, Garth Brooks had a big push for his new album, and he used some social media people, and they drove up from LA, and they were Instagramming, and they were tweeting about it, trying to drive interest in what he was doing. And I was actually asked to participate. I did not have an opportunity to do that, but they using social media. Artists are doing that. Some of the regular brands are doing that. We're seeing that with technology companies. HP, for example, was a winner of a Mashie, and they had the HP Pavilion Vine video. John, let's go to that. That's actually kind of funny. And I mean, it's simple, right? It's a really short form video. It's kind of creative. They did destroy a computer in the process, but it's how businesses are trying to figure out how to use short form content to get messages across. Why is that so important, Todd? Why do you think things like this cute little Vine video is winning an award?
I think you got to look at the challenge that was thrown down to marketers when Vine came out early 2013. It's like, here's this new medium where you only have 6 seconds to tell your story. And you really have to be part of it because it became huge very quickly. And I think marketers were kind of thrown for a loop. They didn't know what to do, what to make of Vine. That's why last year we gave our Mashie to Lowe's, because they actually figured out a useful way to use Vines. In 6 seconds, they had these little home improvement tips that were actually useful. But now, a year or so on, there are people who specialize in Vines. There are people who make a living off of making Vines. People have adapted to this 6-second format really quickly, and it's actually pretty amazing to see how that's happened over such a short period of time.
How is it that agencies are actually specializing, though, in Vine videos? I mean, how do you become the creative expert to do something like that? David?
Yeah, like all...
Or Todd?
David, I could take that. I mean, I think, it's like all of social media. Like if you're an expert in Facebook's only been around for 10 years. I mean, all this stuff is so new that any expert is, they just don't have 30 years of experience of doing this stuff. They're figuring it out, but they're dealing with it every day. And I think when you have that challenge every day in front of you, that you do get creative by necessity. And that's what we're seeing with these Vines. And it's not just agencies. There are a lot of Vine individuals who are making Vines and being contracted with companies to do so, and the same is happening with Snapchat right now.
Yeah.
Go ahead, David.
Well, I mean, I think that's also where it gets more interesting in terms of just that expertise in producing short form content, because I think that a lot of this, as far as like Vine-based agencies or agencies who are just trying to hang their hat on it. That's more of a flash in the pan. I mean, maybe Vine will be really successful for the long run. Maybe it'll really just peter out. But the kind of content that is on there is something that is spreading in a lot of different ways. It's influenced already lots of different kinds of new services that are coming out there. And so I think like it's just more of a question of, do you want to be riding the fad or the trend? And so, yeah, if you look at how Vine is influencing Snapchat and you look at how Snapchat is influencing a lot of these other private messaging services and just all this content that's designed for the swipe and even just the connection between, say, Tinder and Vine, and so it's not just media companies, but now you have some like a dating service there in the mix. They're all very deeply interconnected, and so far more important is to get a sense of how, in all these cases, particularly younger consumers, and not even just millennials, but kind of the younger half of them, and down to teens. Are really using and interacting with these new vehicles, whatever is going to be around and popular in the next year or two or more.
And I want to talk about how people are actually making money on Vine and what Vine, I think the term Shoshana was telling me in chat here, we're talking is actually Vinographers, and what that means, and how do you really become one? It's a new job, and how does one become one? But before we do that, I want to thank one of the sponsors of Marketing Mavericks, which is Audible. Audible.com is a leading provider in audiobooks with more than 150,000 downloadable titles across all types of literature, including fiction, nonfiction, and periodicals. For listeners of Marketing Mavericks, Audible is offering a free audiobook to give you a chance to try out their service. One of the audiobooks that you might want to consider is Amy Poehler. Yes, please. I'm looking forward to that one. It's on my list, as well as Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. Download either of these books for free or another one of your choice. Go to audiblepodcast.com/mm. That's audiblepodcast.com/mm. And we thank Audible for their support of Marketing Mavericks. So Audible, so many books to choose from. I was I was looking over all the audiobooks that I had selected in the past and ones I like. Do you guys actually use Audible? Do you read books? Do you use Audible?
I do, yeah.
Big fan.
Mm-hmm. What's cool about it is you can do it while you're like working out or you're driving or something, instead of wasting your time.
I highly recommend. That's what I should have been doing last night when I heard all that dripping we were talking about. I actually started to download a book, and I thought, no, I don't want to fall asleep during it. I want to hear it. So anyway.
Should have listened to John Pope.
I know that would have probably scared me a little bit. This is an entire industry around making Vine videos and using other types of things. And Shoshana, you were talking in chat about that during the show. We were getting kind of excited. We all want to jump in and talk. What is how'd you call it? A vinographer? What is that?
They're actually called vinographers, believe it or not. Essentially, and I guess Todd was talking about this as well, and David was talking about this as well, is, as these platforms emerge, and many of them are really, the people who are figuring out how to use them best are average people. Brands are looking to those individuals who have been successful in their own right in these platforms, whether it's YouTube and they're called vloggers, or whether are people who are really good at making vines and getting a lot of attention around them. And brands are saying, well, instead of me trying to figure out how to do it, I'm going to go to a known quantity and get them to help me figure out how to take my brand and make it work within this environment as organically as possible. So you have like a sort of a cottage industry at this point of of companies that do everything from Vine development, although agencies are getting better and better at it as well. Vinographers, influencers, I think, are really a new emerging space as well. Vloggers on YouTube have become stars, and now you have brands that are basically trying to use them as spokesperson. You have Michelle Phan, who basically is now a spokesperson for L'Oreal, who basically did makeup videos for a long time. And so you have like this interesting additional layer of micro celebrity that's existing in all of this digital media. And in order for brands to actually have the same kind of presence as they do, is they're trying to borrow their equity similar to the way Nike tries to borrow the equity of a famous athlete. And it's really interesting to see, how these new sort of sub industries are getting created as a means to support brands trying to leverage these new platforms.
Todd, you had a question about Snapchat and how brands are using Snapchat and how that actually played out with the Mashies. What was your question about that?
My question is, what do marketers make of Snapchat? I mean, when it came out, it was sort of like, okay, this is obviously for sexting, and this is a appeal to a certain demographic. But I think what we've seen over the last year is it's become really kind of a mass medium that has a very coveted demographic of, like, say, 15 to 24 or whatever. And marketers are just dying to get in front of these people. But I think it's a very challenging sort of medium. So I'd like to ask Shoshana, what do you make of Snapchat, and what can marketers do with it?
Yeah, it seems to be the question that all of our clients are asking. And I think that we spoke about Vine earlier, and I think that when you're in the sort of early stages of one of these platforms, regardless of the scale that they seem to have, there's hesitancy on the brand side of what is my ROI going to be when we don't really know how this channel works as a marketing platform, right? We know that it works for teenagers communicating with each other. My 14-year-old could attest to that. But in terms of really using it as a brand platform, I don't think it's, although there's been some brands that have been successful, I think it's not quite proven itself out yet in the long haul. So I think it depends on your client. I also think that it's one of those real-time marketing opportunities where lots of planning goes into making it work well, but you got to make sure that that investment is going to pay off on the back end. And I think that most clients are a little bit, sort of hesitant to make that investment unless they have a better guarantee of the return on that investment. And so when you look at the Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, it's a little bit more of a known quantity for brands. And so I think they feel like they can master the platform a bit more. Whereas I think there's a little bit of fear around some of the newer platforms. That all being said, the only way we're going to find out is if we experiment a little. And I think that it's, agencies' job to, work with clients, to test these platforms, to get creative and to try to find ways to make them work. So I'm not sure how I feel about it yet for brands. I would agree. I think it's sort of really early stage and we're not quite sure how it's going to shake out.
You have actually talked a little bit about the Craft Miracle Whip campaign, Shoshana, and I want to talk about that. And I want to get to why Heineken actually was the Digital Marketing Innovator of the Year. What actually goes behind, though, before we get to some of the more of the campaigns, what goes behind who we decide are the agencies of choice? Because there were some agencies that were presented as award winners. How, as marketers, do we look at agencies, and what kind of criteria do we give them? Todd?
Well, okay, I thought you were going to ask me about Heineken as well.
It's coming up.
I was kind of thinking about that. I'm sorry, can you rephrase the question again?
How do we decide who the agencies that are winning or should win awards? I mean, what do we either they are best friends. I mean, it's not like, it's a peer thing where, we just really like you and we think you should win. There's criteria around how we decide why agencies are doing well and why we think that they're being more innovative than other agencies. What's the math? Show your work. How do we decide what agencies are doing well in this space?
Well, first of all, you got to look at how they've done across, for various different clients. Particularly if they have kind of disparate clients, if they're representing someone, who's pitching mayonnaise and they have a car account, and maybe they have, something from a totally different category, and the work across the board is all very good, and it all maybe even has like a signature style to it, like a certain cleverness. That's what when people talk about the hot agencies, they usually have a sort of a signature style, like, you could tell that's a McGarry Bowen campaign, or that's a Crispin campaign, or, that's you can tell that's sort of a Wyden Kennedy, or they're going for a Wyden Kennedy sort of thing. And I think that's something that the best agencies sort of cultivate over time.
Shoshana, what do you think other agencies should be focused on when they're looking at making their clients better? I mean, how are they approaching being better at being digital? I mean, because I've worked for agencies that just really couldn't grasp the new media space, as we call it. And they knew they needed to be a part of it, and they made attempts, and their clients were fairly naive and didn't realize that that they weren't getting the best service in that area. So brands don't always know how to trust the best agencies or who should be the best agencies. What do you think that agencies should be thinking about to be better for their clients?
It's an awesome question, and I guess that's the question for people that work at agencies like myself. And it's been really valuable that a large part of my career I was on the client side. So when I came back to the agency side, I had that really valuable perspective of what it's like to sit on the other side of the table and to pick the right agency partner and to try to work collaboratively to create great work for the brand that's actually going to drive business. I think that, and why I joined McGarry Bowen, I have, as I said, a deep digital background. I was at a digital agency for 3 years prior to this as well, is I think that the real opportunity for brands is going to be at an agency that is highly invested, number one, first and foremost, in coming up with really powerful ideas. And I think at the end of the day, that's really what agencies are in business for. How do you take the brand's equity and an insight about the consumer or about the culture that we're living in or about the way we're behaving and turn that into a powerful platform? You look at a campaign like Dove Real Beauty that I think it's been around now for more than 10 years through all of these new channels being developed, and it's still sustained itself. And that's because it's predicated on a really strong insight about how women feel about beauty, how they judge themselves, and where Dove, sort of sits in that conversation. And as a result of this really strong platform, Dove has been able to continue to make really amazing marketing, both, above the line, as they say, on television and in print, but then in all of these new channels. And I think that, agencies need to remember and need to reinvest in the kind of creative talent that could think about, we call it at McGarry Bowen, the big organizing idea, the idea that is based on an insight that's reflective of the brand's equity and that's designed to really live across multiple channels. And then I think you marry that with making sure you're hiring subject matter experts. I have a small team here, and we are 100% focused in infusing a lot of subject matter expertise into the rest of the agency around mobile and digital content marketing, these emerging platforms, as we'll call them, so that, the rest of the agency knows how to leverage them in marketing. And I think that, if you marry all those pieces together, I think you get this really amazing formula for this new landscape that we're living in. And I think that's what makes what we do really interesting, is that it's not static. It's changing all the time. So we have to keep on top of those changes and make sure that the work that we're creating reflects it.
I want to talk about, like I said, the Miracle Whip and the Heineken. But before we do, I want to thank another sponsor of Marketing Mavericks, which is Squarespace. Squarespace.com, the all-in-one platform that makes it easy to create your own professional website or online portfolio. Squarespace 7 has just been introduced and makes getting started with your unique web presence easier. It's now more all-in-one and simpler to navigate and operate in one seamless experience. Squarespace 7 allows you to live edit on one screen. And it offers instant access to professional stock photography from Getty. That's right. And instant branded email setup with Google Apps. Squarespace has designed category-specific templates that cater to the site requirements for industry groups. For example, New Horizon is a template for brands featuring tour dates, music player, merchandise store, and others. And the developer platform is now out of beta. You can customize your site exactly as you wish. And it's inexpensive. It starts at just $8 a month and includes a free domain name if you sign up for a year. Note and blog apps are now also available on Android too. So to start a free 2-week trial with no credit card required, start building your website. When you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure to use the offer code MM to get 10% off and to show your support of Marketing Mavericks. And to begin using Squarespace 7, existing customers go to the Settings tab to activate all the new features. We thank Squarespace for their support of Marketing Mavericks. A better web awaits, and it starts with your new Squarespace website. We thank you very much, Squarespace, for your support of our show. Okay. You probably have been wondering, what does Miracle Whip and Heineken have in common? Well, they're going to be talked about here on the show for some things that they're doing very creative. And to you, Shoshana, about Miracle Whip, why is the Miracle Whip campaign so important? Talk about what they did.
I will do my best, given the fact that it was produced by our Chicago office, and I work in the New York office, and it was a little bit before my time, but I'm familiar with it. I think that, consumer packaged goods companies have unique challenges with digital because people aren't, you spoke earlier about, ROI and are people actually buying more stuff as a result of all this, all this marketing we're doing in digital. And at the end of the day, no one's really probably going to buy Miracle Whip on a website. I mean, I'm sure there's some people that do, but for the most part, they're using digital really for build awareness, deepen loyalty to the brands, and hopefully create more inspiration and motivation for purchase intent that will be realized at the cash register in a physical store. So I think that they have a really unique challenge with digital is sort of what are you going to do? How are you going to do it? That's actually going to drive that motivation. And I think that what was super interesting with all the Miracle Whip work, even over the years, and I'm now pretty familiar with it as a case study since I've been here, is being really honest about what the brand's about. It's the kind of brand that is pretty, you either love it or you don't. And having the marketing actually be pretty authentic about that. And I think that, the stuff that they did in their Tumblr really, I think this is where digital really works, is when you're leveraging existing consumer behavior instead of trying to create new behavior. When you're doing one-way storytelling on television, you own the story. But when you're doing something online, you're basically inviting consumers to interact and help you create that story. And to me, the reason that that's just such a smart campaign is this a perfect combination of staying true to what makes the brand great and how people feel about it, and then at the same time leveraging the native power of the platform in its organic way and letting consumers really participate in that. And I think that those are the kinds of campaigns that we remember, and even more than that, actually last longer, are not necessarily dependent on buying a Super Bowl spot that has a beginning, middle, and end. The beauty of digital is that it could live on and on and on, and consumers continue to be your advocates and your sort of publishers of content even after you've you finished your part of it. And to me, that's really what makes it really successful.
Todd, Heineken, why were they I think they were the best digital marketing innovator of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Why so?
Yeah, they had some really cool stuff over the last year. I think one of their sort of pièce de résistance was, if you will, they had this sort of Instagram puzzle, which was during the U.S. Open, I think it was. They had a picture of the crowd, and you had to pick out certain people in the crowd. I forget how it went exactly, but it was sort of this puzzle that was fairly difficult to solve. It used Instagram in a new way, which is sort of they strung together pictures in a sort of giant panoramic picture. But in addition to that, they're constantly doing innovative stuff on Twitter as well. And they've been doing innovative stuff on Twitter.
Shoshana, any final thoughts on what you think was the best outtake for 2014? And I know we're not quite at the end of the year yet, and anything can happen. But what do you think that we learned from the intersection of digital and marketing for this year?
Wow, that's a hard one. I don't think I was prepared for that.
Well, there you go. You must have a lot of faith in you, Shoshana. I know that you can give us this insight.
Okay, I'm gonna try. So I think it was an awesome year, actually, for digital. Who would have thought that someone throwing a bucket of ice on their head and putting it up on Facebook for a nonprofit organization was going to be not only the marketing phenomenon, but basically the cultural phenomenon that it became. Who would have ever thought that? I mean, I think that's one of the most amazing things about this year. And yes, obviously there was a socially relevant message there that a brand would not necessarily be able to pull off. But I do think it says something about big ideas that resonate in digital and resonate in our culture don't have to be the same form factor that we're used to seeing since the 1960 Mad Men. I think that's a little bit of sometimes a hard pill to swallow for agencies, but I know our agency is super excited about the fact that the creative opportunity for brands is so much more diverse, so much more interesting, and not necessarily limited to a 30-second television commercial that runs on broadcast or cable television. So that would be number one. I'm super inspired by that. I think all the stuff that's been out there around, I'll call it girl power, everything from the work on Goldie Blocks. I'm a fan of a campaign for a website called Hello Flow, and then the larger brands from P&G doing Throw Like a Girl, where the sort of repositioning of the way people think about what the capability of girls and women are, using digital as a way to bring that to life, I think has been a hallmark of a lot of the great storytelling and the great digital work that we've seen this year. So those are sort of, two highlights. I mean, obviously we can't forget Ellen and Samsung's selfie at the Oscars. I think that is probably will go down as probably the best return on investment for 60, not even 60 seconds of content in real time on a piece of programming. And I think everybody's also trying to figure out how to replicate that. But I think it was just an awesome year of experimentation, of brands taking chances, of brands trying new things, and of at the same time really beautiful video storytelling, both on the web and on television. Meet Me at Starbucks is one of my favorites, and there've been a bunch others. But to me, I think if you're a creative or if you're in advertising or working on brand marketing, I don't look at these as challenges. I think these are all opportunities. We have a much larger palette of tools to work with, and we should embrace them and make great work from it. So.
Well, I'm super excited to get through the holidays and see what happens next and celebrate the end of the year. We'll love to have you come back, Shoshana, and talk about what you're doing and have you back again on Marketing Mavericks. If somebody wants to follow you, they want to connect with you, what's the best way they can do that?
Oh my God, are you really going to ask me that?
I did.
Well, I would rather it be for McGarry Bowen. So it's at McGarry Bowen is our handle. I'm pretty, active on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram, but I'm not a big tweeter, I must admit, even though that might not be popular for a marketer to say. And I like the idea of it being from the platform of my agency, whereas I do most of this work. So.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We also had with us Todd Wasserman, the business editor at Mashable, and he's at Todd Wasserman on Twitter. That's at TODDWASSERAMAN. And I'm tweeting about him after the show, so you'll be able to connect if you follow me at Tonya Hall Radio. And we had David Berkowitz, and we appreciate his time in joining us today. Even though he wasn't able to make it in studio, he was in the Bay Area. He is the Chief Marketing Officer at MRY, and he's a contributor at Ad Age. Be sure to check out what he's writing about and see what he has to say. We thank all of our guests of Marketing Mavericks, and I thank you for tuning in. If you want to follow the show, we're all over social media. You know we are. We're on Google+, sometimes. We're also on Twitter at Tonya Hall Radio. You can use the hashtag Marketing Mavericks, or find me on Facebook, where we tweet about the show and where we post the show on Facebook afterwards. Thanks everybody for tuning in. If you want to write to me, that's old school. So if you're not big into social media, but you still have email, you can choose mavericks@twit.tv. I love reading your email, and I want to hear who you think we should have on the show and what you like and maybe what you would prefer we do different. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.